An airplane flew over low, then landed on a lake about a mile away. I was sure it was the people who'd been drugging me and following me and robbing and torturing me. I have to win this war. They snuck up on the Geese Lake cabin and drugged all the food. I will kill them. My bullet wants to eat pork.
Welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. The northern Canadian wilderness has a history of attracting those looking to escape from life. But with it comes danger. People simply vanish, their fate left unknown. And one of the perils of the land, according to Indigenous legend, is the wrath of the spirits. Crossing one, some say, can result in death. Here now is Jules Knox with the Mad Trapper.
Straddling the border between British Columbia and the Yukon is an area known as Teslin Lake. During the Klondike Gold Rush, prospectors passed through here in droves, searching for their fortune. But by the 1980s, the vast riches being chased up north were not so much the gold, but the wilderness, the solitude.
You could go for days on end and never encounter another human being in there, and it's absolutely wild. When you fly over it, you don't know whether you're flying over one lake with a lot of islands or mainland with a lot of lakes in it. You look down and you'll see what you think are cattle in fields, and they're actually herds of moose.
The land is remote. It's the kind of place where cabin doors are left unlocked, and usually the only trespassers are bears. But somebody was on the prowl, raiding cabins, stealing boats, hoarding food.
I actually heard about him from somebody stationed up there years before this. Yeah, there's a guy up there, they call him the ghost of the forest, and I've seen him once. He was a legend in his own time up there for how he could live and survive in the forest.
He was a scary individual to the people up in the Teslin Lake area. The hunters and trappers were scared by him. He'd threatened them, and they believed that he maybe would shoot one of them.
And rumors started swirling after a trapper was reported missing.
In the early 80s, there was a trapper by the name of Gunter Leachy disappeared.
A pilot from Atlin flew Gunter Hans Leachy into Hutscola Lake, along with all the necessary supplies to construct a cabin and prepare for a trapping line in that region.
And he arranged with the floatplane company to come back in the fall on a certain date and pick him up when he'd be done. So the floatplane operator flew in, and Leachy wasn't around.
They could not find anything in their air search. And immediately upon returning to Atlin, came into the detachment. There's lots of things to consider when somebody makes a report of a missing or overdue person. He could have fallen in the lake. He could have been attacked by a critter, had a tree fall on him. It was also possible that he had decided to hike his way out. And he certainly had the bush skills to do so. As the investigation progressed, I made a patrol up to his cabin, which was outside of Atlin. The cabin was meticulously constructed. I remember one thing that has always stuck with me. I noticed there was a soap dish with a used bar of soap in it. And what struck me unusual about that was a soap dish with a bar of soap leaves a soap ring. Not in Mr. Leachy's house. Everything was neat, tidy, and precisely put away. Leachy had been born in Germany. He was conscripted into the German army. He was captured by the Russians on the Eastern Front and sent off to a labor camp towards Siberia. where he was brutally treated. A few years after the war, he came back to Germany, but was unable to comfortably settle back in. He ended up coming to Canada and northern British Columbia.
4 years passed. Gunter Lishi wasn't found. But then, another cabin raid triggered a series of events that some say awakened the wrath of an Indigenous legend. About 30 kilometers away as the crow flies, there's an island on Teslin Lake. And it's this island where the so-called ghost of the forest was believed to have fled and camped after his latest raid.
The Tlingit people told us that that island is sacred. On that island is buried a shaman. That island is for that shaman and for the Indigenous people when they use that island for those cultural purposes. It doesn't belong to us. There's no need for us to be touching it.
The so-called ghost of the forest had finally gone too far. The Mountie's elite police unit, the emergency response team, was called in to corner the man.
As we got into the helicopter, it almost felt like that scene in Apocalypse Now where those helicopters are coming, we could have the music playing. It felt like that.
They said this is a pretty scary situation. There may be a possibility that one or more of us may not ever come back.
But before we tell you what happened, we need to follow the trail of clues from the beginning. And it starts with Gunter Lishi's disappearance. When the pilot picking up the German trapper couldn't find him, he talked to his neighbor, a man named Michael Oros.
Oros had said, no, I don't know anybody by the name of Gunter Lishi. I haven't seen him around here. He must have left.
But the floatplane operator recognized some of the building materials that were there, and he said, okay, there's something wrong. So he flew back to Teslin and reported to the police. That says, I think you better look into this.
The police went in to speak to Oros, and Oros had disappeared, which he did quite often when he had any inclination that the police were going to be coming and looking for him.
Police tried to learn more about Michael Oros. The two men had met. Lishi took this photo of Oros.
And he was an American from the Midwest. He came to the wilds of British Columbia as a result of being an American draft dodger.
Theory is that he went to Alaska first, went across the border into Canada, where at the time, immigration was allowing draft dodgers to come in and become Canadians. It wasn't too long after that he became a recluse and went out on his own.
Michael Oros first lived in this cabin in the Chesley area of northern British Columbia.
He called himself Chesley Free Mike. Chesley is the river system, and I believe he had some sort of a symbol, was like a Celtic cross. He carved it into a tree or into a cabin door to mark his territory.
Oros left blazes on trees and notes on the blazes and messages, and he had a sign, the burning sun symbol. And it was his sign. He sort of marked a territory the way a wolf does. And there's no question, when Oros touched something or he came into a territory or he walked a trail, he appropriated it as his own. So it was his country, his trails, all the old cabins were his. When he stole things, as soon as he stole them and they were in his possession, they became his property.
Oros was known to be a real thorn in people's sides. He was also a petty criminal. He would break into cabins, steal food, steal boats.
Sometimes there was writing or a note of some kind that would indicate he'd been there, but wouldn't indicate that he did it.
He's dressed almost in ragged clothing, a scraggly reddish beard, longish, sort of off reddish brown hair. You can tell so much by a person's eyes as to what he had, these wild and crazy eyes.
During a police search for Gunter Lishi, Mountie stumbled across Michael Oros's personal diaries. It turned out he was a prolific writer. His journals talked of surviving the cold and hunting for food, but his writings also rambled about being drugged.
July 12, an airplane flew over low, then landed on a lake about a mile away. I was sure it was the people who've been drugging me and following me and robbing and torturing me. October 19, 1981. I have to win this war. They snuck up on the Geese Lake cabin and drugged all the food.
He was very reclusive. He was suspicious of anything and everybody. He called planes that were flying over the looky-loos, spying on him. He believed that there were people in the bush that were spying on him.
Police couldn't peg Gunter Leachy's disappearance to Michael Oros. But at the very least, they believed he was their only witness.
We were able to get a search warrant, and we went back with the intention of apprehending Oros.
Welcome back. When a German man disappears into the wilderness, Mounties aren't sure if he vanished of his own volition. So they try to track down the only possible witness, an elusive woodsman. We return now to Jules Knox with the Mad Trapper.
Mounties wanted to question Michael Oros about the disappearance of Gunter Leachy, but they struggled to track him down. Finally, 7 months later, officers hatched an elaborate plan to take Oros into custody.
They flew in to Putsagoa. They were dressed like surveyors, I guess with high vis and the equipment. They had this planned. So Oros came out to see what they were up to, and Oros left his cabin far enough away that they somehow approached him and managed, when Oros was making the run back to the cabin, they tackled him and got him down.
There was an outstanding warrant on a theft of an Alaska State Fisheries boat. Of course, the ultimate goal was to further the investigation into Gunter Leachy's disappearance.
Oros was taken to Terrace, and he was lodged in cells, and he went berserk, and he was smashing things up inside. Mike Budai was a police officer in Terrace at the time, and Mike, because of his physical strength, was probably the only person that had the guts and the ability to go into the cell.
He ripped the jail cell apart, like the sink and the toilet, and Mike went in there, and I guess they had a little bit of a wrestling match, and the next thing you know, the guy's playing the funky chicken because Mike had choked him out, and they had to put 2 straitjackets on him to be sure that he was secure.
And Oros said to him, point blank, "I'm going to kill you one day."
By then, Mounties had found some of Gunter Leachy's belongings in Michael Oros's above-ground storage cache.
Oros was found in possession of Gunter Leachy's .357 revolver and his camera.
And the question is, how did you get it? He was very cautious, sometimes spoke in circles. I'm not going to talk without a lawyer, but I don't want to call a lawyer. Sometimes spoke of things that he felt were affecting him that bordered on the nonsensical. How aircraft flying over were the CIA, and they were drugging him from the sky. The underlying tone was, people will come and I will have to defend myself. These bad people, I have to kill some of them.
Officers asked Oros in a roundabout way if he did kill Leachy, how he would do it.
The response was, well, when it's low water, you could go out onto the shoreline, dig a grave, and you could cover that up with gravels and mosses, and very quickly there would be no sign that there'd ever been a hole dug. There was no confession. However, through the investigation, there was a considerable amount of strong circumstantial evidence. At that time, we fully felt we had a murder on our hands. Evidence was reviewed painstakingly by Crown Counsel, and they felt that a charge for possession of stolen property, being the camera and the firearm, was a reasonable approach. There was no charge of murder at that point. It boils down to no body, no charge. The judge agreed that we had a very strong circumstantial case, but in the end, he felt that it didn't meet the threshold for a conviction. Orris was released from custody and allowed to go on his way.
And we did everything we possibly could within the rules to keep him out of the bush, and we weren't able to do that. As the Crown Counsel, I was a senior prosecutor involved in the case. It's a very frustrating place to be when you have a man in your custody that you know is a killer, you know is going to kill again, and you can't do anything to stop that from happening. And all we can do is wait till the next killing.
After his release, Oros roamed the streets of Terrace. Not knowing who he was, Constable Gary Rogers stopped him on patrol.
And he was this wild-looking guy with the hair and the eyes. So I stopped and I just did a routine check to see who he is. He looks at me and he says, "I could kill you." And then I patted my sidearm and I had my revolver in my holster, and I patted that and I said, "Well, I could kill you too." So that's as far as that's going.
Oros eventually returned to the wilderness of northern British Columbia, where he lived with his own demons. His journals detailed a deterioration of his mind, and he often wrote of the police.
I will kill them. My bullet wants to eat pork, mainly cold and clear today.
It was mostly about, he hated the pigs, which were the cops, the government. Everybody was out to get him.
You could see the progression that he was documenting. He developed an anti-authority persona over time.
He talked about the sneaker rounds and the torture druggers, these phantom-like figures that came out of the night, ran between trees, poisoned his water supply, poisoned his food.
There were planes flying over with castration spray trying to castrate him. There were times when he thought they were coming to shoot him.
On March 18th, 1985, a trapper by the name of Frank Hayes went to his cabin and they found it ransacked. There was chunks of a moose carcass that had been hacked off and were laying about. Chunks of their furniture had been smashed up and used for firewood.
He was in a state where he didn't distinguish his dreams from reality, for example. He was living, to say he was living like an animal would be unkind to the natural world.
And they were like so traumatized. They had to sleep overnight and they thought he was going to come back and get them. And then the next day they went out onto the lake and there he was. And they essentially outran him and went to the RCMP.
And that brings us back to the crucial crossroads we told you about earlier, the Mountie's standoff with the mad trapper.
The Teslin Lake RCMP member and a bush pilot flew down from Teslin Lake, and as they're flying over, they see him on the ice, and they see that he lays down on the ice, takes his rifle, and there's a puff of smoke, indicating that he was shooting at the aircraft.
The call would have gone from Teslin Detachment to say, not only have we got a crazy man, we've got a serious crime, a break-in, and an attempt to shoot down a plane with 2 people in it. This is a ERT operation, got it written all over it, which in American jargon they generally refer to as a SWAT team.
Gary Rogers was on the emergency response team with his close buddy, Mike Budai, the Mountie who had restrained Michael Oros in the jail cell.
When the call came in that notified us to be on standby to go after Michael Oros, Mike right off the bat said, "I don't like the feel of this one. This is dangerous."
And Oros had threatened to kill both of you.
Yeah. He's already shot at a plane. He's out in the bush. He's on his own territory. He's armed with a rifle. He's got the smarts of a human being and the cunning of an animal, and he's determined to kill you. Like, this is the most dangerous big game hunt you could imagine going on.
Remember that on the team felt that Oros was going to have to be shot. I don't think any of us felt that he was going to give up without a fight. In this country, a fight means a gunfight.
On the morning of March 19th, 1985, 2 teams of 3 departed in separate helicopters, hoping to convince Michael Oros to surrender.
The bush pilot spotter plane had gone up and determined that Oros left the cottage that he'd broken into and had taken his dog and sled back onto Teslin Lake and to a small island that the natives had named Shaman's Island, which was basically a sacred area, and he had made a camp for the night.
Mike Budai and his police dog trooper, Gary Rogers, and Paul Hogan filled the first chopper.
So we did a long circle to the south, and then we flew in right at ice level all the way so he wouldn't be able to see the helicopter come in. And we did a few fake landings. We got out of the helicopter, and Mike and I broke off to take positions. He checked my M16 to make sure there was no snow plug in the barrel. He tapped the magazine just to make sure that the weapon was going to function, and I did the same with him. And then he looked at me and he said, my code name was Alfred. He said, Alfred, you know, if I don't make it out of here, you can have my chainsaw. And it wasn't really with a smile or anything. And I said to him, his nickname was Bood, and I said to him, Bood, we're going to be all right. We got each other. Our whole idea was to get one team to one side of Oris, one team to the other side of him, and to try to squeeze him, to bookend him, to keep him, contain him out on the ice. From quite a distance away, we could see Oris out on the ice, approaching a stretch of open water. The idea was to have him get close enough to us that we could make verbal contact with him, but not have him see us, identify ourselves as police, tell him he was under arrest and order him to surrender. We could not only legally justify shooting Oris when he was still out on the dogs teamers headed to the lake, it was just too far. It was 300 plus yards, so we had to let it play out.
I had stressed that if at all possible he did not get off the ice, that we kept him out on the open lake ice so that we could see him and not allow him to get into the bush.
So we felt that our concealment was substantial to avoid Oris from being able to spot us. He knew somebody was in there, but he wouldn't be able to see us. So what we felt we were in a very safe position. And being the fact that we were completely camouflaged in snow camouflage gear, we felt quite confident that he couldn't get the drop on us.
Oris stopped his dog sled and made his way into the bush, traveled about 300 yards towards where the second team had dropped off in the bay.
He was stalking him, and somehow he decided to turn and come on, and I think it's because he realized that us in the helicopter had landed ahead.
Oris went back to his sled, took the dog and sled farther on the ice, and then stopped, took an extra set of snowshoes from the sled, and then made his way into the bush.
And then something critical happened. The RCMP spotter plane ran low on fuel and had to return to Teslin. Oris realized he was no longer being tracked from the air and went on the offensive.
And he went into the bush line. And I said, guys, he's headed for the bush line. Watch the left flank, watch the left flank.
He actually walked right out to the lake bank and would have been able to see where the helicopter had just set down in the snow and where the members had deplaned, put on their snowshoes, and made their way to the locations. He would have tracked each and every one of them to their specific location. It wasn't like he had to go searching them out.
What we never, ever expected was that that man would turn into the hunter.
In no more than 10 minutes, I said, guys, haven't seen him. Watch the flank. He could be coming for us. And Bood says, yeah, got her under control. I think Mike was 25 yards from me to my left, but I couldn't see him. The bush was already thick enough and he had himself concealed. And then another few minutes went by. I just got this awful feeling. And I just slowly looked over my left shoulder.
As I looked right through here, there's a gap between the trees, right through all that willow brush. I could see what I thought was a shape of a face. And as I put my eyes onto it, it almost illuminated like a light bulb.
It was like this orange glow materialized in the scrub brush. And Oris had a sort of a reddish brownish beard. His skin was much the same color. And I looked and I realized it was Oris. And I must have yelled verbally, Bood, he's right behind you. And just bang! I felt like I went into this I don't know what you call it, out-of-body experience. It was sort of like I had sitting on the branch of the tree, observing all this, and I felt like I had all the time in the world. So I can't really see the rifle, I can't really see his hands, but I see the motions through the brush of him working the bolt of the rifle and then swinging it over at me.
Instinctively, I up and fired the gun right through here, and by the time I recovered from the shot, the face was gone.
There wasn't time to take another shot because when I recovered from the slight recoil and the bang, ready to get maybe a sight picture this time, he was gone. So I had no idea whether, you know, he's playing dead. I missed him. Now he's down. I don't know if this madman is going to come and circle me from another side, or he's just going to pop up and shoot me. So nothing. And then I went on the mic and just very quickly, boot come in.
There was silence over the radio.
Welcome back. After 2 single shots are fired in a standoff between Mounties and their suspect, silence falls over the land. Now, officers wait in the stillness, trying to determine if the gunman is still stalking them. Here again is Jules Knox with the Mad Trapper.
So we had to wait until the spotter plane came back. See, it had been out there earlier and ran low on fuel, and it had to go back to Teslin to refuel. So it was taken out of commission when this was going down. Otherwise, we would have had the eye in the sky.
Really rough.
The spotter plane was able to see Boris laying in the snow and with blood around his head, and they said, yeah, we're fairly sure he's gone.
The first thing I saw was going in was I saw Michael Oros lying in the snow on his back, had been shot in the head above the left eye. The round had opened up the skull as it traveled through his skull. He was obviously dead. Then made our way to the location where Mike Boudet was, and he too was dead. He'd been shot, and he may have turned his head when Gary Rogers tried to make contact with him, because the round went in just below the right ear and exited out below the left ear.
Within a 10-minute period, this wild man of the bush had covered about 400 yards through the bush in snow that was up to your chest and got behind the Mounties.
I never would have believed that a human being could travel that distance of 800 yards in about 5 minutes in that deep of snow on snowshoes. Now, the mistake that we made was underestimating this person.
It's the only time that I had ever seen a member killed on duty. Pretty devastating.
I'm just sick. I threw up. I didn't break down in tears. That's for later. I've shot a man, and so first thing I do is I turn my weapon over because now it's a piece of evidence. We're into, you know, a double homicide here now.
I got a phone call from a friend that told me, you better phone home. And right away your heart just goes right into your throat. I finally got through. I had to get the operator to cut in. And then here my older brother Frank said that Mike is dead. And I said, what happened? He was shot by a mad trapper. I just was in such shock. And when I walked in to the house finally, there were a lot of people who were down already. It's been on the news. And Mom and Dad were just in shock. Dad was sitting in the chair just quiet, and Mom was in major tears.
Something should be done to stop this. These young men are being cut down in the prime of life. 27 years old.
I just can't believe this happened. It's so surreal. This couldn't be Mike. Of all people, not him.
To a lot of guys, he was Superman. Like somebody said, you'd figure a bullet would bounce off of him. A day and a half before he was killed, he had phoned me. And the funny thing was, Dad always wanted a beaver hat, and Mike said to him in that phone call, or to me, that I've ordered him one and it'll come to your house. He had been promising that for a while. I don't know if he had a premonition that he was going to go or what, but it sure seemed like it.
Mike Boudier was the life of wherever he was. He had a way of lighting up a room when he came in. He was a fun-loving guy, but very serious, hard-working member. Loved his career in the RCMP.
Mike and I were very close friends. We were like brothers. Mike had nowhere to live, so my wife and I said, this is a no-brainer. Mike's going to move into our basement suite. Mike was just part of the family, so it was a hard thing to go back to Mike's room with all of his stuff in it after he was killed.
The flag now flies at half-mast outside the Brooks and other...
Mike was buried in Brooks, Alberta, near his hometown. One of the largest RCMP funerals ever held. Thousands of members at it. And I was one of Mike's pallbearers.
His dog led the procession to the cemetery. And one thing that I'll never forget about that funeral was that at the cemetery gates, on both sides of the gates, were dog members and their dogs. And they howled. It made the hair stand on your back.
The facts surrounding the death of Constable Boudier are well documented. He was shot by the Mad Trapper. The Mad Trapper, in turn, was shot by Constable Gary Rogers. What's not as well known is what local Aboriginals think happened that day. That there might have been spiritual intervention which saved the life of Gary Rogers.
The native story goes that Oris was a deranged man in the area, and now he had offended the shaman, and through revenge, the shaman would kill him.
And so the spirits, according to folklore, played a role in his death. Jammed the gun, guided the bullet, and saved the life of Gary Rogers.
There was what had been a live round in the chamber. The firing pin had actually hit the primer of the round in the chamber. And for whatever reason, that round never fired.
I was in his crosshairs, and he pulled that trigger, and I know that rifle was pointed directly at me, and it was only like 140 feet away. That's nothing for a shot with a high-powered rifle. And so, for whatever reason, his round didn't go off and gave me time to return fire.
Now it's strange because that morning, a native lady went into the police station and told them to warn your warriors that Oris is a madman and he's going to try to kill you. You have to be very, very cautious. But she said in the end he would die.
Something stopped this, and something guided my bullet to stop Oris from doing any more damage. You can turn to whatever belief you've got, but this is physical evidence.
I believe that had Oris had the opportunity to have shot Gary Rogers, that he may have been able to then kill more of the officers that were there.
It would have been a bloodbath.
Welcome back. Now that the man known as the Ghost of the Forest is dead, Mountie's follow up with an old mystery of what happened to the German trapper. Here now is Jules Knox with the conclusion of the Mad Trapper.
Michael Oros foresaw his death. He knew how the end would unfold.
The diary he wrote the night before and the diaries he had written in the 2-3 weeks preceding this event, he in fact mentions in the diary, he writes about the big shootout. It's happening soon, that he hoped to kill as many police as he could before they killed him. He expected to be killed.
Team leader Ken Allen wrote the police report.
From Oris's diary and the note left in the cabin by the owner finding it broken into, it is now clear Oris was ready for a confrontation with the police. Oris was not a sane human being.
One part of the diary that was missing, he was suspected of killing Gunther Leachy, and he had written in his diary, they believe, what he did that day and took his possessions and everything like that. But those pages are missing, so he ripped them out so that nobody could read them.
There was never really a detailed search for Leashy's body in around the cabins at Hutsagola Lake, just because Horace was still on the loose, and it was too dangerous to go in there with this madman about, not knowing if he's going to get the drop on the police and shoot them. So after Horace was dead, a forensic identification member from Prince Rupert by the name of Richard or Dick Hessler went in.
So when we arrived, I was quite surprised at all the bones in the area. He was a trapper, so he would kill a moose or whatever and butcher it, throw meat and bones out to his dogs. There was about a 10-acre area that was littered with hundreds of bones. I picked up and photographed 13 bones, and 12 of them were human. The one that I did find that was significant was a human shoulder blade bone with a bullet hole through the shoulder blade. In looking for the bones, we also made an effort to walk the shoreline. We found a location where there was heavy black plastic partially submerged in the bank of the lake. Now, when Horace was interviewed, he had stated that if he did anything like that, that he would bury him on the edge of the lake and in plastic and sunken into the lake. So we felt that that was the location where Gunther Lischy's remains were buried, but they had been disturbed by probably animals. So it was determined in the inquest that Gunther Lischy was indeed deceased. He was identified through his dental records. The coroner said that a bullet hole through the shoulder blade would have killed him because it would have went into his lungs and organs.
Was Lischy shot from the back?
Yeah, we believe so, yeah.
Why do you think Horace killed Lischy? What's the motive here?
I guess that Lischy was infringing on Horace's space, because Horace already had a cabin there. Probably he saw Lischy as a threat to his territory, or also he might have just wanted Lischy's building supplies and his revolver and his camera and just shot him to get us to rob him.
When they interviewed Horace, he admitted to knowing him and that he didn't like him, and this is kind of weird. He did say he didn't like him because his fingernails were too clean.
Do you think Horace killed anybody else?
There's no proof of that. There's suspicions. There's been people who have been reported missing through the huge area that Horace roamed in, but then that's the north in the bush country. Any one of those missing people could have been killed in an accident, fell out of a canoe and drowned, or got killed by a wild animal. So there's some speculation, but no proof.
Had Horace gone wild?
Oh yeah, he was absolutely wild. There was nothing civilized about that man whatsoever. Not in his eating habits, his sleeping habits, his action, in his psyche, everything. Man was completely deranged.
I mean, this guy was described as a mystical wild man who was probably a human that was closest to being an animal, or an animal that was closest to being a human.
He's nuts, but he's not stupid. He's a madman intending to kill police officers. He's recorded in his diaries that's what he intended to do. My bullets will eat pork. He wants to kill all the pigs.
Oh gosh, that's where we are in society today, is people with mental health issues don't always get the help they need. And it's just as comfortable for society if they go off in the bush alone, isn't it? And is that good? Is that right? No, I don't think so. And nowadays, the bush that we push people off into is a tent city somewhere. Not seen, forgotten, just don't cause any problems. And then when it flares up, we all cluck our tongues and wish the best and send our prayers. Now get back in your tent city or out into the bush.
On the 10th anniversary, I went back with two Canadian artists. Roy Henry Vickers is very well known, and then also his friend and painting associated, Ed Hill, who was a retired RCMP staff sergeant. When we landed at the lake, neither Roy or Ed had ever been there before. And of course, this was on March 19th, 1995, 10 years to the date. The stretch of open water was still there. Day was just about exactly the same, clear, sunny, warm, quiet. They were looking to get the vision for the painting. How these two guys operate is kind of magical. They get the feeling for it. They have to visit the spot, they have to soak it in, understand the story, and then eventually the vision will come to them.
The idea behind the painting was to sell prints to raise funds for Vision Quest, a new recovery center in Logan Lake.
My dream and the dream of many people that I know is to see a recovery center in Canada that the likes of which we do not have, and that's a full-blown recovery center dealing with the addictive personality rather than treating the symptom, which is very necessary to deal with the personality and the reasons for addiction.
Roy walked out on the ice, out over the lake, the frozen lake with the open water towards Big Island, looking, trying to find the image. As I approached Roy, I said, "You found it, didn't you, already?" He said, "Look." And there it was. Both of us knew that was the image.
Without knowing it, the artists had found Mike Budai's last view of the world for their painting, the scene the Mountie saw as Oros snuck up from behind. And there were omens that confirmed their choice.
Recently, I just painted a painting that I called Trumpeters, and what's that? 7 trumpeter swans flew out of the hills right at me. And it was absolutely so powerful that it dropped me to my knees. We're standing talking to each other, and I hear, and I look up, and the eagle's circling. And Roy's family is eagle. And he looked at me, he said, "We got it." And that's when Gary said to me, "I want to take you guys into where Mike died." But in we went, and Roy had brought with him a ceremonial red stone pipe. And I looked out. I said, "Roy, look. That image that had come into focus for us was the last view of the world Mike Budai had had when the bullet hit his head."
It's fitting for me to think that the image came from Mike Budai's last line of sight as he sat here, sat in the bush there. This was the scene that he looked at. And to know that that is the scene that I'll paint.
The vision on canvas is to be unveiled before the dead Mountie's parents and the co-members of the emergency response team who were with Budai that day on Teslin Lake. Finally, the moment.
On behalf of the City of Terrace, to dedicate this park to Constable Mike Budai.
30 years after Mike Budai's death, the grief was still raw for his friends and family at the dedication of a terrace park in his name.
And I remember Mom going in the porch, her eyes filled with tears. She still look for him to come home.
To this day, if I see a policeman, I have to think about Mike. It's still hard to believe. You just figure he's on duty somewhere right now. And I guess maybe that's how I was able to live with it.
I still have the cartridge casings to this day. I've kept them because it reminds me of my mortality.
Nearly 40 years after the shooting, this painting still sits front and center in the homes of those affected by this story.
The sale of the memorial painting for Mike Budai raised the first $100,000 for the Logan Lake Recovery Center, which is still in operation to this day. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat. Want more episodes of Crime Beat? Listen to the Crime Beat podcast, now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And for past episodes of Crime Beat, go to the Global TV app, visit globaltv.com, or check out our Crime Beat YouTube page.